Great. Emma, welcome to the first episode of the Platform Cooperative podcast. And please tell us who you are and who are the other people who were founders of this brilliant project of yours, Equal Care Cooperative.
Hi, Leo. Hi, Josh. My name is Emma Back, and I am starting Equal Care Co-op with my co-founders, Kate Hammond and Fran Watson and Amber Wright. My background is in kind of the care and support and voluntary and kind of community sector. So I've sort of been involved in community projects and charities for the past 10 years or so. My kind of previous roles have been in mostly around kind of development, so tendering for services that for tendering for social care services. So I kind of had this view of the social care market that was a little bit of an odd one, I guess, because I would sort of see how services were closed and begun and changed. And I was also very involved in writing about kind of what those services would look like when they were up and running, and would always see that the kind of the words in my words and the words of the commissioners and the words of the middle managers and the words of the senior managers, and it was kind of very difficult for them to live up to the aspirations of those services, which were mostly around putting people in charge of how their support was delivered and empowering them to be able to offer support to others. So there was a lot of narrative, a lot of interest around that. And so I saw that was really difficult to actually do in a kind of procurement and sort of environment and a hierarchical organization, and one that's kind of in an industry that's dominated by low tech kind of solutions. So I had this idea about the platform that wouldn't go away. And I sort of sat with it for a while, wrote about it, sort of did little thought experiments and desk research, and kind of learned a lot more about what the sharing economy was, and then realized that I wasn't really getting anywhere. So I asked my friend Kate to help me get somewhere. And she amazingly said yes. So we then kind of convened. We did a few workshop sessions locally, and I just wrote a couple of articles in the local press about what I wanted to do. And so then there was this kind of self-selection where people read that and were like, yes, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to come to this workshop. So then that's how Amber then got more on board, and Fran, and then a few others as well who sort of volunteered over the course of the year, but then have had to step back because volunteering for a year and a half that's quite an ask, really. So that's kind of some of the background. So we've been working on developing this project for about a year now, and not focusing anywhere near as much on the tech as I thought we would. So I started off thinking, it's all about the tech solution. See that kind of, then forgot all about that, going, it's nothing to do with the tech. It's actually much more about the cooperation and the governance and the how do you make kind of decisions together, and how do you stay accountable, and how do you ensure that people stay safe without kind of turning into a massive pyramid. So that was actually a complex series of questions. But then I got involved with Sociocracy for All and they're kind of helping to answer those questions, and helping to kind of unite these sort of governance ideals with what the platform is going to look like. Yeah, so I just feel like I've spent a year writing kind of policies and rules for an organisation that's trying to do away with rules. There seem to be a lot of rules involved in becoming a platform co-op.
Yeah, I remember I was following the British elections, and there was a lot of publicity around this, what was phrased as dementia tax, where the ruling Conservative Party proposed that people who have assets over £100,000 would be taxed. Those assets would be taxed to pay for their social care. And it was very hated policy, and I didn't agree with all the details, but I was a bit disappointed at the discussion around it, because it seems that this social care is hugely growing, and it's not currently done in a sustainable manner, and it seems that there isn't a lot of people with concrete solutions. But that's what makes this equal care cooperative so brilliant, that you are actually working on some sort of solutions to this huge problem around all these aging economies around the world. So what would you say is the state of care work in the UK and also in the area that Equal Care Cooperative specifically operates in?
Okay, I'll try and keep this one kind of brief, because obviously there's been reams and reams and reams written about this, and there will continue to be. The dementia tax was an interesting one, because all it really did was draw attention to the fact that tax already exists, but in a less explicit form. So if you get dementia now, then you will be liable for the majority of your care costs, whereas if you had cancer, then you wouldn't. It's kind of that stark, really, in that some diseases are treated as diseases and others are treated as social care. So yeah, anything that's really associated with old age, and things like kind of mental health as well, this is the point at which the NHS kind of backs off, and then your local authority, so your council, takes over. And then when that happens, then you get a hugely varying, you get varying experiences in the NHS, obviously, but with local authorities, the picture is so different from place to place, because it's all been locally commissioned. There are very different kind of budget levels. So Surrey is able to spend a lot more on their social care than Calderdale. Kind of Blackburn sort of is, I think, one of the poorest councils in the country for spending on social care. And there are huge differences in the rates of pay that care workers get up and down the country, and that councils are willing to pay. So I think kind of the biggest disparity is like £11.50 or thereabouts around kind of Blackburn, Preston area, which is not so far away from where we are, and then around £19 an hour in urban kind of Oxfordshire, and Oxford. So it's a very scattergun kind of picture, that also makes way for kind of a lot of opportunities for innovation, perhaps kind of quite a lot more so than if you're just looking at working directly with the NHS. So that's kind of the upside to social care, I guess, is that we try things a lot. And so, yeah, there's a lot of really good practice in the sector, as well as not so good. The existing state of social care is that it's the narrative in the UK is that it's in crisis. It's always been in crisis. It will stay in crisis, kind of. There was actually an event recently in Manchester where there was called Social Care Future, where people are now starting to pay attention to what. Sorry, Kate has a cold that only seems to have developed in the last half an hour. So please forgive the violent sneezing. Where was I?
A conference you attended.
Sorry. So reframing the conversation about social care is not about, it's not a system in crisis. It's a system that kind of needs support and development, and but it's more about kind of changing systems than it is about sending food parcels. So yeah, I think kind of where I saw the opportunity for Equal Care as a platform cooperative was the amazing flexibility that platforms have to both create a very personalized experience, but still have the capacity for, say, kind of one individual, one organization to kind of commission quite a lot of work. So the way that a lot of social care is bought in the UK is through block contracts. So I'm a commissioner, I'll pay you £100,000 a year to support kind of 50, 60 people with a community-based mental health service. And so as a block contracted service, as a service provider, I would usually just, hire maybe 4 or 5 members of staff, and then kind of put on some activities and do some one-to-ones and that kind of thing. With the introduction of a platform, then suddenly there's a lot more choice involved. So I could choose from a much wider variety of activities. I could choose the person to support me. It can be based on a personality match rather than just on who the organization thought would be a good hire at the time. And it's much more flexible in terms of how it can be used. There are care platforms that have already started up in the UK. They've started up with kind of many millions of pounds of equity. Their founders are kind of mostly founders who have already established platforms before, so they're kind of serial entrepreneurs. So we're sort of definitely up against the Ubers of the care platform world. And they tend to start in kind of massive cities, most of them are in London. There are a couple in Manchester that are basically knockoffs of the ones in London. In fact, there's one where you read the terms and conditions on their website and they forgot to do the find and replace from the provider that they copied them off, which I always like reading. They still haven't noticed that yet. So yeah, we're doing a few different things, I guess. So we're starting in an area that's quite rural. It's sort of in the Calder Valley. It's like a string of market towns that all run along the valley, and then either side of the valley there are lots of tiny little villages that are scattered around the tops, and they all get kind of cut off in the winter, and the wind howls loudly, and care workers sort of struggle their way up there and either make it or don't, or make it incredibly late, and all of that feeds into a much higher cost of care and support in those areas. So if you kind of take away this sort of picture of a platform as like an income generation machine, like this is going to make me loads of money, and then see it as a proper facilitating community tool, something that can work for people rather than just sort of take little chunks out of transactions and gradually amass great wealth, then suddenly that challenge kind of starts to fit a little bit better. So we're sort of part of our pilot project is to work with kind of one of these communities that gets very isolated in the winter and gets cut off, and to use the platform as one of the tools that we'd be working with to allow that neighborhood to manage and supply its own care and support, and to do that in a kind of regulated way, to do that in a way that allows the council to come in and buy services as well. and also in a way that will give the people offering support who live in that area access to more work in the surrounding towns and villages. Because one village of 2,000 people is not enough to support a care agency. So yeah, you always end up with care agencies based in the main towns, and then there's the rural problem that sort of keeps coming back to bite you. Yeah, there's one woman up there who gets she calls it getting fired by her care agency every year. So they kind of ring her up and they say, "I'm really sorry, we can't support your mother-in-law anymore." So she's just like, "Oh, you're firing me as a client." And they're like, "Yeah, sorry, you're too far away, too difficult to get to, too much of a challenge." So yeah, it's a big problem.
So you have a multi-stakeholder structure, ownership structure. And if you could explain what that means and a bit elaborate on how the governance works there. How do you implement the democratic ownership of the platform?
So this was an interesting one. There are no model rules for platform co-ops. There are platform co-ops who have done their own bespoke rules. So we looked at Stocksy, we looked at Fairmondo, and we haven't done what I think is quite a common thing for the platform co-ops that I've seen that are up and running, which is to kind of give the founders a sort of separate membership category. So we haven't done that. We've just been like, you're just members, you know. So we've kind of gone more along sort of the setting this up as a charity kind of model rather than setting it up and kind of trying to get our sweat equity back out of it at some point in the future. So yeah, we've set up as 4 main categories. One is the supported member. So obviously there's the 2 sides of the platform. There's the person being supported, and then there's the worker member. So anyone contributing their labour can be a worker member, and that includes volunteers. So we sort of wanted to make a statement about the validity of volunteer work. It is work, it is labour. You have just as much of a right to cooperative membership as a paid employee. And obviously the independent workers be offering support through the platform can become worker members too. Then the supported members side, that's if you're receiving support through the platform. Again, if it's volunteer support or if you're paying for it, it doesn't matter. You just need to be receiving a service kind of via us. And if you are too ill to become a member of a co-op, because it is a legal role, then we also have the advocate member category. So that's for friends and family who are, you become a member on behalf of somebody else who is getting support but isn't able to make use of their membership. So that's to make sure those people have a voice. Then the 4th category is the investor member, and this one was quite fun coming up with, because obviously we wanted people to invest in us through this special kind of vehicle in the UK that's known as a community share offer, and also donate us. But we didn't want to give any equity or any power to investors. So the investor membership category is a restricted category. You are only allowed, it's a kind of proportionate, it's the only proportional one. So investor member votes will only ever count for 10% of the overall outcome of any vote taken in the cooperative. And they are also restricted from voting for to sell the co-op. So they can't do that. And besides, even if we do sell it, then it has to transition into common ownership anyway. So we're kind of trying to take away any incentive for, in our rich and glorious future for anyone to want to buy us. Or to, so yeah, that's kind of the main setup. then those membership categories are represented on the board.
And do you think that the cooperative model provides some sort of positive externalities to the society as a whole compared to if you were a shareholder model?
Yeah, I mean, I more often end up contrasting the cooperative model with a charitable one. So kind of because the shareholder model just kind of unites sort of risk and financial investment. So it doesn't have any other concept of risk and what an investment might constitute, like whether you're a paying customer or whether you're contributing your labor. So it's actually more straightforward to go like, oh, well, no, we don't want to be that. But being a charity is obviously, you could create something that's entirely congruent with our sort of ethos and our values and what we're setting out to achieve. But the thing that charities don't do, that private companies actually do, is that or the vast majority of charities don't do, is that they don't give real power to their beneficiaries. Like, unless they have a really kind of bespoke memorandum and articles that genuinely wants to redistribute kind of power. Oh, and they also can't redistribute their surplus. So you get a lot of charities in the UK just sitting on funds. So there are a lot of very rich charities around. And their beneficiaries don't get any say in how those funds are spent. Like they don't, that's not even up for discussion. So you kind of get this weird governance structure where you'll have a board of trustees, some of whom, and a lot of boards of trustees will have beneficiaries represented, but then you have like a massive sort of sandwich in the middle of kind of workers and the management committee, and it starts to look very much more like a business than a charity. And then you get the beneficiaries who are kind of the recipients of the lovely program that the charity is kind of trying to offer. So yeah, but fundamentally charities don't change the power relationship between the giver and the receiver. They almost inevitably perpetuate it. Whereas cooperatives don't. The cooperatives are the only legal structure where you can take your beneficiaries and you can take your frontline workers and say, look, kind of, here you are, this is yours. This is your organization. You're a shareholder, you're a voter. You can choose to be that, or you can choose just to experience the organization as a service provider, providing a service. But it kind of fundamentally changes the reason for that organization's existence, and I think actually starts to bring to light, like to surface some of those embedded power structures that are in both private companies in one way and in charities in another. Yeah.
So I'm sure you are very busy, but have you had time to look if there are other similar cooperatives around the world, or is this a very unique model?
There are definitely, there's one other multi-stakeholder care cooperative that I know of. Although they're still technically constituted as a charity, but they are operating as far as a cooperative as it's possible to be. There are quite a lot of care worker co-ops. I don't really know of any. Oh, the care and support platform co-ops. There is one starting in Lithuania. So funny enough. And I think there is probably one or two or three or four starting in the US, but I haven't come across them yet. So yeah, I think with our particular governance structure and approach and proposal and our kind of reliance on a platform, that's a sort of, yeah, that's a mix that we haven't seen yet, but hopefully we'll see more of.
Yeah, let's hope so. What stage is the cooperative at the moment?
Still pre-trading, on the cusp of starting our local pilot, which will initially start as just an introductory service for care workers and care people wanting support, and will kind of rely on a combination of our of paper, oh God, and a lot of face-to-face, and kind of be more the test bed as we develop the software and the prototyping over the course of this month and then the forthcoming year. So by the end of 2019, we expect to be kind of fully up and running locally in Hebden Bridge and Todmorden, and a regulated care and support provider. So yeah, still very nascent. But yeah, we don't have a huge amount of like seed capital to burn through. So.
And where would you see the equal care cooperative in 10 or 20 years?
Well, all right, 20 years. What I would really like is for equal care to be able to offer a real alternative to service provision that is, I mean, assuming that kind of the UK government continues with its current procurement regime for social care services, and lets any company just kind of go for it. I would like us to be competing and winning against the likes of Serco and Interserve and G4S and CareTech, and I shouldn't really be naming him, but you know, so the big private shareholder-led allied healthcare companies that are which look at kind of the UK care economy as sort of just care sectors and slices of business to generate profits for overseas. So I would like us to be competing on that level, but to be able to do so with a distributed structure. So with local groups that are acting kind of semi-autonomously, to be able to come together and bid for work that covers those particular geographies, which varies a lot in the UK. It could be anything from the level of an individual council through to kind of huge swathes of the country. So that. I would also like there to be more social care platform cooperatives.
And how could the UK cooperative and the public sector help out cooperatives like Equal Care? Is there something that the local councils could do? And has there been has the UK cooperatives helped you out somehow?
Yes. Yes, in a word, really quite a lot. So the, oh God, yeah, my Co-ops UK have been like a stalwart partner in this for about 2 years, actually, since I first got some volunteer mentoring with a cooperative development advisor who also lived in the Valley. And so we would just meet over coffee and he would say, oh, what's this, you know, and he would like make suggestions without actually making suggestions. So you sort of go away and like, so you think it's your idea, and which is a really, really, really useful skill. And then I did a pitch for Cooperative Congress. So that kind of introduced me to the wider co-op sector, because I'd come from Charities. I had no connections with the cooperative movement at all, really. And then it kind of snowballed from there. We then participated in Unfound, which was I think it is the world's first platform co-op accelerator. I think we just got in there just before the US and the Australian ones started. So, and yeah, it's also quite a quick accelerator, 2 months of very intensive development work. So we have I think it is safe to say that we have a very close relationship with Co-ops UK, and they are well invested in our success. So we, have to get it right. We've also been helped by other local co-ops. So we have a crowdfunder running at the moment and got support from Co-ops UK and Suma Whole Foods, which is a large food co-op in the UK, and that was amazing.
And how can people who are watching this help you out? Is there anything you will say to people in general about this brilliant project of yours?
What would I say? In general, yes, please help. That would be amazing. Like, we need so on a sort of volunteering type front, we need people who are really interested in governance and like the nitty gritties of governance and kind of getting things down on paper, and also, getting that working with people. And then there's, sort of developer expertise, which we're hoping to be able to bring in-house next year. And then on the kind of fundraising front, we've got a crowdfunder running at the moment, which is exciting and mostly terrifying. I mean, it's just terrifying, actually. It's just terrifying. So we're like 34% funded. Not that I'm checking every 10 minutes. So that's on crowdfunder.co.uk. And just search Equal Care Co-op and we should come up. That closes on December 13th. So that's a really key one, because we then want to, learn a lot from the crowdfunder about kind of things to do and things to not do, things to not ever do again, so that we can then launch a community share offer in March, which is the kind of seed investment round, which is like a special type of, think of it as more like a friendly loan, rather than an investment, because the stock does not go up and you can't sell it to anybody else, so it's pretty restricted. So that's kind of helping on a financial front. But I mean, just having supporters, just like knowing that people are out there kind of going, let's do this, and let's do this elsewhere, and kind of let's all learn together. And people who are really good at curating communities as well. I like talking to those kinds of people, because there is still so much to learn.
I actually have a couple of follow-up questions for you, Emma. The platform co-op aspect of what you're doing seems to be what is people are interested in, or it's like it's the sexy part of what you're doing. But in listening to you talk, you said like, we're kind of put the platform thing is kind of on the back burner right now, and what we're really focusing on is just the more building a cooperative stuff. And you mentioned that the platform was one of the tools that you were using, but there were definitely others. I'd just like to kind of hear about your experience for other people who are interested in doing this thing, which, full disclosure, I'm kind of interested in, very interested in doing this thing. We're talking about very similar types of models in rural Montana in northwestern US, where I'm at. So I'm just kind of curious as to, apart from any platform stuff, just what your organizing process has been and what you found has been like the most important to move this forward over the, sounds like, couple of years that you've been working on it.
So there are a few tools. The platform is a tool, the cooperative is a tool. It's all a means, it's just a means to try and change the balance of power that exists in social care. That is the goal, to put the person receiving and the person giving absolutely in charge, and to kind of, protect and nurture that relationship. So yeah, some of the things that we're kind of bringing in on that is there's a technique or a system of governance that's that's now really quite popular that a lot of people are talking about in the UK, which came over from the Netherlands, which is called Buurtzorg care, and that's based on where did that came from, like kind of teal organizations and sort of other alternative governance methods, sort of sociocracy based and that kind of thing. But it's basically self-managing groups of care workers. And they kind of get coached and supported and so on, but it's a very attractive sounding model if you're a commissioner who wants to spend less money. But it's also a very attractive sounding model if you are a disaffected care worker who's just being told what to do, and not given your sort of your full autonomy and empathy and all of the kind of wonderful magic things that you could do. So that's one thing. The other thing is sociocracy itself, which we are kind of fully embedding in the organization. So when you write this stuff from the ground up, like, you can't just copy and paste anything apart from I can't even copy and paste our health and safety policy. Like, it's ridiculous. So it's entirely bespoke, as it were. But I think kind of the main idea that's really pushing this is co-production, which is a concept that's now fairly dominant in the UK, but very difficult to do and very expensive to do. And it's a governance method that was developed by Edgar Kahn in the 70s, and he also invented time banks as a means to implement co-production. So this is where the power of platforms kind of neatly joins up here, because you can be both things on a platform. You can operate, you can be a buyer and a seller, you can be a host and a guest, you can be a giver and a receiver. So that's where it's like, oh yeah, your role doesn't have to be stuck in this I am always receiving services, kind of I am this person that is always receiving services. There is this other way where people can be genuinely recognized and rewarded for their skills. And it is not another volunteering program that's kind of running alongside some service. It's deeply embedded in the DNA and the nature of and the design of the service itself. So that's kind of the really cool bit, I think. And yes, we are going to embed an alternative currency in there so that we can make full use of Edgar Kahn's thinking about co-production and how it relates to economic wealth and social status. And again, it comes back to power. Yeah, I think that's all the tools for now. Oh yeah, open documentation is another one. So yeah, we're just putting all of our bylaws on the web. They are visible for everybody. I mean, a lot of it at the moment is entirely kind of heavily borrowed from Ted and Jerry's work at Sociocracy for All. And I'm about to go start on their Sociocracy Academy, which is running next year. So it's a shared endeavor, and I guess trying to make that as open as possible is difficult as well, because it means a lot of extra work. And we're still learning how to do that. And then also bringing in people who have been sort of habitually excluded from society in various different ways is also really difficult and it's expensive and it's time consuming and it's, you know, resource hungry and all of these kind of negative connotations to it. But it's also kind of fundamental to being a human, not just equal care co-op. Like, it's just, if we don't do that, then we make the same mistakes as everybody else. So yeah.
Just one other question for you, Emma. Now, on the platform side of it, who's been actually doing the coding and actually doing all that stuff? Has that been donated from co-ops, or is that something you've had to pay for? And is that going to be an open source model that other people will be able to adapt to their locale when it's done?
So yes, the open source question is a big question, because because it's so bound up with the governance. It's kind of like, oh, but you kind of need to be a co-op to really do this and to go all the way, instead of just going, oh, there's a platform, I'll just use the platform. It's like, no, you need to embrace the governance as well. And if you don't, then don't use our code. So yeah, it's entirely, well, it's a combination of being incredibly bespoke and entirely off the shelf. So the bespoke part is we have a Tech for Good developer that we are working with and that we have a bit of funding for. So we're paying them, they're giving us a really cheap day rate, which is amazing. And that has come through a grant from a kind of local giver, a local foundation. And so they're doing the prototyping and they'll be doing some coding over the course of the next few months. Then there is ShareTribe. So we have decided to go with this also, incidentally, the CEO of ShareTribe really loves platform co-ops. So not that we have a discount on their services yet, but I'm angling for one. So we are at the moment just using their basic product, but they've now developed ShareTribe Flex, which we're hoping we'll be able to adapt and then combine that with sort of care coordination tools and the full design over the coming year. So yeah, it's very, very bootstrapped. That's kind of the only way that we can do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great that you're thinking of, through all the implications of the open source model. And it makes me think about, I can't remember their name, maybe Leo can remember. I think they're a French group, somebody on the continent, a co-op it's like pedal powered delivery, bicycle deliveries kind of thing. And they have a platform and their deal is you can use it, but only if you're a worker co-op. So they have some sort of specific license for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're probably going to go down that route, but maybe be a bit more flexible about I don't know. I think like the fact that both givers and receivers are represented in the cooperative is more important than it would be for a cycle co-op or a taxi co-op. Like, passengers are sort of, I don't really need to be that involved in the governance of my taxi app. Like, I'm just going to get a taxi and hope that it's a nice ethical app. Whereas for care, it's such a different relationship that it's pretty fundamental that the two sides of the transaction are empowered through the governance. So yeah, I don't know. When we've got a product open source. But yeah, very open to kind of building it with others as well. I think I should, underline that. So kind of anyone who's interested in working on this as a project for social care and support, would be massively interested in doing that together.